I deal with anxiety, and I didn't want fleas in my home. So I've hired Mr. Brown to build a shed in my backyard, and I've only seen him once. He came one time and never came back.
See, the thing is, I got a mercy.
He said he was on vacation.
This is the worst tenant I ever had. 6 months, I got not a dime from you.
It's very uncomfortable.
He sounds like he could be in a De Niro movie. It's just when you're talking like this, you know what I mean? I want you out.
Plaintiff Lacey Morris is suing for $3,250 for an unfinished contracting job. Defendant Aldrickus Brown claims the plaintiff demanded a refund before he had a chance to finish the job. He says he owes her nothing.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Najee. How are you?
I'm doing well, Judge. How are you doing?
Good.
This is case number 155 on the docket, Morris versus Brown.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Judge.
And welcome to both of you. I see we have here the plaintiff, Lacey Morris, and you are suing Aldrickus Brown for $3,250 for what you say is the cost of an unfinished building for your dog and grooming business. Okay, let's start with you, Lacey. What do you have?
I am the owner of a room house called Grooming, where I'm a ferologist, and I deal with animals who have anxiety, pets who have, parents who have anxiety. I basically do house call grooming services to people's home. Since the pandemic, I decided I wanted to expand my business and build something to offer my clients, and I wanted to build a shed outside my backyard, basically, because I offer emergency services, and I was doing it inside my home, but some of the pets, sometimes they have fleas, and I didn't want fleas in my home. So I met Mr. Brown through his cousin. I do his cousin's dogs like every 2 weeks. His cousin recommended him. Originally, he was supposed to do floors for me, but instead he did some other work for me, so I basically trusted Mr. Brown. And I hired him to build a grooming shed in my backyard, and I've only seen him once. So if you look at Exhibit R, you'll see what he built. He came one time, basically threw it up, and never came back.
Oh, okay. And how much did you pay him for this?
I paid him $3,250, Your Honor. I cashed app him the money on August 4th, and he started work on August 22nd, and I haven't seen him since August 22nd. On Exhibit X, you'll see where I sent him $3,250.
Okay. Was there any discussion about whenever he did start, how many days it would take to do it?
Not through text message, but verbally, he said it would take like a week, probably.
About a 5-day project. Okay. Let me now go to Aldrickus. Yeah, what's your case here? What's your argument?
See, the thing is, when I came down there and started the shit, I had went to her house like 2 or 3 times on different occasions. But when she sent me the deposit, the $3,250 for the shed, I was already on a job that a lady had gave me $10,000 for. So
sure,
I was in the mix of doing both of the jobs at the same time. She called me like, "Where you at?" I was like, "I got a mercy. I got to go up and make sure these folks' stuff completed before I can come down there." But at the same time, I was having truck problems with my truck, and it came to an issue that it was raining. It started raining one day. So when I woke up and seen it was pouring down raining, I was like, "No, I'm not going down there." So 9 out of 10, they're gonna be raining down there. So I went and did some inside work. So she asked me just to send her money back. I said, "I ain't got no problem sending your money back."
Your Honor.
So I told her I spent $1,800 in material. She said, "Well, send me $2,000. I said, "Why would I send you $2,000 and I spent $1,800 in material?"
All right. You said you spend $1,800 material.
Yes, I did.
You've submitted receipts that add up to about $1,100. What was the other $700 for?
The rest of the material what I supposed to tuck down there on the trailer. But she told me she didn't want me to finish the job, so I didn't never take the rest of the stuff down there.
Okay, Lacey, go ahead. What did you want to say?
Your Honor, and he was just very rude. He wouldn't call me back. I had to hunt him down. I called him one time. He said he was on vacation. Like, I gave you my money
Okay.
to build a shed, and I need it done. If you look at the text messages, I constantly asked him for receipts. He never gave me receipts.
And what I tell you, I told you my truck was at the shop getting fixed.
If you had a receipt, Aldrickus, if you had a receipt, why didn't you take out your phone, take a picture of the receipt, text it to her so she can see the receipts?
I didn't have my truck at the time.
You're saying the receipts were in your truck?
It was in my truck the whole time. When Ashley called me for the receipts, I had don't got my truck back.
Do you have pictures here of your dog grooming business?
The new shed is the W, Exhibit W, S, and T. If you notice, it's a little bit smaller, so the guy had to take down the beams and readjust it. He said basically what Aldrickus built, I would have been under a pile of rubble because there was no nails, there was nothing.
Okay, Lacey paid you $3,250. She had to believe that in a reasonable amount of time, particularly if she pays you $3,250, is that you're going to find time to do it. Otherwise, you shouldn't have taken the job. So I am willing to say that the amount of money that you spent for the materials that you gave to her, you don't have to send that money back. You spent it on materials that she now has. Secondly, I'm going to say that you put in 1 day's work on the site. So I find for the plaintiff in the sum of $1,650.
You didn't even have to go through all of this. It was just the principle that you wanted $2,000 back. When I'm telling you that you saying you ain't getting me nothing for my time, like, it could have been resolved.
This honestly could have been avoided if he would have just gave me the receipts, and it just took him forever to do it.
Plaintiff Dan Fryer is suing for $5,000 for 6 months of unpaid rent and late fees. Defendant Ryan Miller claims the plaintiff made his life miserable. He says he owes nothing.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Najee.
This is case number 079 on the docket, Ferrer versus Miller.
Thank you. I see we have here the plaintiff, Dan Fryer. You are suing your ex-tenant, Ryan Miller, for $5,000 for 6 months of what you say is unpaid rent and late fees. So let's start with you, Dan. What is your case?
Well, I rented an apartment to Mr. Schmuckowetsky over here, a broke male escort.
How do you spell that? Schmeckalepsy? How do you spell that?
I think it's S-C-M-O-C-K.
No, I'm just being... Stop it. Okay. Be respectful. Okay, Mr. Miller, yes.
Well, and I met him through a previous tenant of mine that rented from me 4 years ago. That was a good guy, and he paid his rent on time. And I had no problem collecting his half of the rent. But from the get-go, this maggot tried to worm his way out of paying his monthly rent. He was late the first half a year, and then he just stopped paying in January. This is way before the pandemic, and I don't know why he thought he didn't have to pay. I had a friend of mine living upstairs who was pestered by the guy. He was always hitting on the guy. He eventually moved out, and I had to take a loss in the middle of the winter in February, where it's real cold here in Minnesota, and rented for $100 less than what I was normally getting for the rent. I don't know where he got off thinking that he didn't have to pay the rent.
What is the relevance of the fact that he had friends coming over, these guys coming over?
He was a broke escort that didn't have any money.
You're saying he was an escort?
Well, that's what it appeared to be with all the traffic. He had 3 different guys a day he'd have coming over to the place.
If he couldn't afford their rent, he wasn't doing very well.
Well, I can't speak to that, but he's not the most appetizing looking guy.
Well, let's hear from you, Ryan.
I met the plaintiff in June of 2019 to sign the lease, my roommate. From July till December, things were relatively okay, at least from my perspective. In December, I changed jobs, and so there was a delay in my income for a couple of weeks, and I was trying to deal with that. As the month went on, I let him know that I was going to get paid on a certain date, on January 17th. There was a delay with the new company as far as no direct deposit. It was mailed. I wanted to work out a potential payment plan if it became an issue for me as far as the late getting payment for my work.
You didn't make one payment over a half a year.
How many other months were you not paying?
Once communication completely broke down, and then he filed this case, then I'm like, well, that's when we'll have to work the situation out. The last time I paid would have been in December, so January is when it stopped. But I didn't make that decision until all of this threatening emails that came from him, the voicemails, which is also part of the evidence that I kept getting from him. It just wasn't a comfortable situation.
Well, can I hear the
for me at all.
voice? Okay, all right, let's take a look at some of that.
Hey, buddy, you don't want to return my phone call. You don't want to work with me. You better start looking for another place to live. Okay? You lied to me. You said you're going to have it on the 17th. Now you tell me it got mailed on the 17th. It's the 25th. It doesn't take 8 days, okay? I want you out. Just leave. You got to go. All right? That's it, Ryan. You are going to have a judgment against you, not only for the rent, but you're going to have trouble renting a doghouse after there's a UD on your file. And then we garnish your wages, and I collect. So you get out.
Okay, now I admit he sounds like he could be in a De Niro movie, but the actual,
and Your Honor, that's just an example.
The actual words, okay, yeah, yeah, but the actual words, he was basically saying, look, if you don't pay the rent, I want you out. That's a reasonable thing for him to say if he's not getting his rent, and he says, at some point I'm going to take some legal action, and then he's telling you what the legal consequences are. I'm not saying that's polite, but I'm not saying that's over the top either. If he had a different accent when he was saying it, I don't think it, when I read it, it didn't sound so bad.
Appropriate.
It's just when you're talking like this, you know what I mean? I want you out. I
even asked for the lease to get out of the lease early because this was escalating unnecessarily because of lack of communication.
Okay, that's a fair point, Brian. That's a fair point. So let me bring it back to you then, Dan. Did you really want him out? What you really wanted was the rent.
I thought he'd be motivated by the threat of eviction and the blemish that he would be placing on his roommate after the judgments and the eviction and the public record that stays for 10 years.
The motivation should have been through communication. He was talking to the upstairs tenant about me, which was information that didn't need to be shared, as far as also calling me an escort, which is not true nor appropriate. It became to the point where it felt very unsafe. And we go through this pandemic, we're on lockdown, and he's wanting to show the apartment and bringing people in during this lockdown.
Well, in June and July.
No, during the lockdown of the pandemic.
During the last couple months of the tenancy, I started showing it because they weren't going to renew the lease. And I actually didn't rent it. I took 2 months of loss because of the pandemic. I had some people that were going to rent it, but then they lost their jobs.
Your Honor, if you look at
evidence...
But
there's no excuse for this guy not paying the rent.
I understand there was a breakdown in the communication you would have liked, and I understand that. But as long as you're living there, you understand you need to be paying the rent. And he has the right then, if you're not paying the rent, to seek to have you evicted or bring a court case. I mean, all what he was saying was truthful. I mean, he wasn't like threatening you. He wasn't like going to say you're going to sleep with the fish.
But the communication was very inconsistent as far as me trying to work something out with him, but he would not even give me his email. I had to fish for that to get that information just to get communication with him.
He had my email. He communicated with me. He didn't pay any rent. He promised to pay the rent.
Until you started threatening me.
Why wouldn't you have been paying at least what you could at the time?
With the threats and then him talking to other tenants and just all this false information.
Well, that's a separate action.
I felt unsafe.
The feeling of being unsafe, were there any specified threats made to you other than bringing legal action for not paying rent?
Well, the fact, Your Honor, that he was talking to another tenant about the situation, also...
The other tenant was talking to me about it and complaining incessantly.
There's nothing to
complain
about.
You were hitting on him. He didn't want to have nothing to do with him.
True.
You were getting drunk on the front steps.
I saw him maybe twice over 6 months.
6 months. I got not a dime from you.
You clearly owe the rent for January, February, and March. for those 3 months. I can't even come up with a theory why you wouldn't have to pay for the rent. And you probably have to pay for April because it's 10 days in April, which practically says that he can't suddenly find another tenant for the rest of the month. The only thing I'm left to try to figure out is whether you really owe for May and June because you didn't live there, and whether by that time there was, in a sense, constructive eviction, because the plaintiff has mentioned on a number of occasions that he didn't want you there
Your
anymore.
Honor, he had a lease that terminated at the end of June.
Yes, you're bound by a lease unless you're constructively evicted. In other words, if it's a place where he no longer feels, for example, physically safe.
Which
in other words,
not, Your
that
Honor.
is called constructive eviction. And you, in fairness, Dan, you have made it fairly clear that you didn't want him around. You thought he was an escort. I mean, you're making it clear here that you wanted this guy gone. And that message clearly came through to him. I'm not excusing him for the time he lived there.
I wanted him gone if he wasn't going to pay the rent, Your Honor.
Which I was trying to work out with him, but he would not communicate.
And all you have to do is write a check.
That wasn't the situation.
Yeah. You know what? It sounds cold, but the plaintiff is right. In other words, you owe that rent. Once you sign that lease, he's met his responsibility, unless you can show that you were constructively evicted. And honestly, Ryan, I know you were unhappy there, but I can't tell you that it was impossible for you to live there because you lived there for 4 months. We were only talking about an additional 2. And never during those 4 months do I see evidence of you paying anything towards the rent that you owed.
There were 2 different times that I sent. It was like $100, and then he said, "Send whatever you want." And then one day he says,
I never
"Send what
received
you can."
any cash.
And then he said, "No, I wouldn't send you cash. It would be direct."
I never received any monies of any kind.
One day he says, "I want you out."
Anything.
The next day, "I want you to stay
Well,
and
let
pay."
me see
It's
it.
like I want to
Let
make this
me-
arrangement because I wanted out.
We were talking about a half a year. You didn't pay me 1 cent.
Twice. There was a payment that happened in January when I had some money, and then there was a couple of months later that I gave him before.
$10.
What this suit is about is, did you fulfill the requirements of the lease, which says I have to pay this amount of money every month? And you didn't, and therefore I have fined for the plaintiff $5,000.
This is the worst tenant I ever had. He's, just tries to take advantage of every situation, and I'm supposed to feel sorry for him, and he's got every excuse in the book.
I felt unsafe because of the emails and the threatening voicemails he left for me, talking to the upstairs tenant, spreading lies about me.
Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching. For more Judge Jerry, click here. For more Jerry Springer, click here.